Hello there guys and welcome back to my channel. My name's Matt and today I'm going to be showing you how to make... What is that? You're killing flies again. Okay, cut. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a concrete utility worktop including splashbacks all the way around and also a sink cutout for an undermounted sink. And I'm going to be showing you how to make a food preparation surface for a pizza oven. It's going to be sealed with a very high temperature food safe sealer. So all of the products that you can see in this video can be found in the description below as usual. Now I'm going to be showing you how to make the worktop from start to finish. So keep watching. Thanks a lot. So I'm starting off here by cutting down some 18mm melamine board into strips for the splashbacks you'll see in a second. So I've got the base board there, which is the actual size of the splashback that I want. And then I've cut some strips that are 20mm plus 18mm, which is the thickness of the melamine board. So I've got a 20mm thickness for the actual splashback. And then the worktop itself that will have the sink cut out in it will be 40mm in thickness. So I'm actually making the strips for the edges of those to 58mm so that it fits onto the side and gives an exact height of 40mm. Now you can see I'm doing the sink cutout out of a 50mm piece of insulation, and I chose 50mm because it's slightly larger than the 40mm of the worktop, so it will stick out slightly from the top, and it means that the concrete won't fill into the sink area at all. So I'm just checking that it's perfect to the template, sanded it down a little bit with a block sander, and just putting some sellotape around there so that it can have a nice smooth surface. Now I'm just wiping down the molds to make sure they're clean with a window cleaner and just a piece of tissue. Kitchen towel is perfectly fine for that. Now it's all clean, I'm just putting a bead of silicone onto the corners of all of the edges that are meeting, and I'll wipe that with my finger to give a nice smooth radius. Then I take the template for the sink cutout and just measuring and making sure that it's in exactly the right position for the customer. This worktop is going to be moulded upside down, so it's going to be on the left-hand side when it's actually moulded and finished. Just sticking this down now with some no more nails or grip fill, whatever you can find to stick it down. It doesn't need to be particularly strong, it just needs to hold it and keep it in position. Just checking the measurements here. And then sealing around the edges with some more silicone. I'll go around that with my finger again and make a nice radius. It's important to reinforce your worktops. If you've got a sink cut out, then you've got very thin edges on the side there. So you want to use about 10mm reinforcement bar on the edges and some steel mesh for the center just to make sure that it doesn't crack over time if someone sits on it or leans on it or there's something heavy being mounted on it. So I'm even adding some reinforcement to the 20mm splashbacks just to add a little bit more impact resistance. These are little pieces of the steel mesh, which is 6mm in diameter, the actual thickness of the steel. So I'm just hoovering out the molds now and making sure that everything is clean. I also add a layer of cooking oil to make sure the mold is nice and smooth, and just polish it off to make sure it's a bit shiny, but don't leave too much residue of oil. That will act as a nice good mold release. So I'm just cleaning out the mixer here to make sure there's no debris in there that's going to print through onto the worktop, and mixing up the concrete afterwards. I've added a mortar plasticizer to the mix to make sure that it stays as movable and workable as possible for as long as possible, because when you vibrate it you want to make sure you get all the air bubbles out and you want to stop it from going stiff so quickly. This is a high strength pre-mixed concrete, which is 40 newtons. I've mixed it to a slightly more wet than usual mix so that it will flow easily in the mold. I know that some people might disagree with that because it can reduce the strength of the concrete, but it really stops you having as much work to do later filling all of those gaps and holes that you have, because the concrete will fill the mold properly. If you get it a little bit more wet than usual, it will fill the mold and it will stop you from having lots and lots of air holes and bubbles to fill afterwards. Just putting the reinforcement here into the worktop on the right hand side, which is the pizza oven surface. And just patting it down and now vibrating it. The best way to vibrate is to use an SDS drill around the edges and to just shake it up and down for about 5 or 10 minutes. You can do it for longer, but if you've added enough water, you don't really need to vibrate it as much. So I'm now just gouging out the sink cutout area, which is just removing the insulation with a chisel so that when I turn it over, it's completely flat and doesn't raise it off the ground. And I've also sanded the backs of both of the worktops with some 40 grit sandpaper to make sure it's nice and smooth and level all the way across. Just washing it off because that'll be the last time that you actually see that side. Just cleaning the bottom of the pallet there because I don't want to get any bits of aggregate to give any pressure points and crack the underside there. This is the most satisfying part, demolding it. You get to see the results of your work, and it came out really nice and smooth with this one. We did have a little bit of dips and issues on the underside of one of the worktops, so I'm adding a bit of slurry to a plastic box here and mixing it up and just filling those areas on the pizza oven worktop. So I'm just cleaning off the top side of the utility unit worktop and the splashbacks just to make sure there's no debris on there, because that will affect the final polish that you give. I'm using 240 grit sandpaper for this one because it's a nice rough finish. That's what the customer wanted. And every time I'm sanding, I'm also cleaning it off with water to make sure that there's a fresh piece of water on there, because that will affect the lubrication and help sand it more effectively. So I've waited about 4 hours for that worktop to dry out in the sun so that as much sealer as possible will absorb into the worktop surface. You can see here that I'm saturating the surface with as much liquid as possible. This particular sealer is called H-Seal Countertop Sealer. It's my favourite sealer at the moment because it gives off a nice matte finish when it's done. It's a food safe and a high temperature sealer, so it's really good for pizza oven worktop surfaces. And if you'd like to get a hold of it yourself, you can click on the link in the description to find out where I got it from. So I'm now going back over the pizza oven worktop surface with some 1200 grit wet and dry paper. I'm just trying to make the dark spots that you can see there on the surface blend into the surface to make it more consistent and as even as possible. They're actually just a slurry mixture that I used to fill some of the voids on the surface because it wasn't completely consistent after it was molded. And now I'm just washing it off and using a squeegee to dry off and get rid of the dust. So obviously I left the worktop to dry for a good amount of time before applying the sealer. On this particular day, it was a very hot summer's day. It was the peak of the summer in England, so I think it was about 35 degrees. So I left it for about 2 to 3 hours, and you can see here now I'm applying the sealer. I applied about 4 layers to just make sure that it was as fully waterproof as possible and that sealer was completely saturated into the surface. And now you can see the final results. So I'm really pleased with how both these projects turned out, and if you found this video helpful, then please do consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel because it will help more people see the video. And I've got plenty more concrete content coming in the future. And like I said, all of the links for the products and tools used in this video you can find in the description, so you can get a whole shopping list for everything that you need. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.
Oh my god, there's another one.
Okay, cut.